Members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on S. 1335.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I rise in strong support of the Pilot's Bill of Rights. S. 1335, the Pilot's Bill of Rights, is intended to restore fairness to airmen in Federal Aviation Administration enforcement proceedings by providing airmen timely access to critical information and adding an additional level of appeal for airmen disputing an enforcement action. This bill also requires the FAA to improve the system of providing notices to airmen and directs the FAA to review and improve the medical certification form. Pilots have expressed frustration and concerns about what they believe is unfair and inequitable treatment during FAA enforcement proceedings before the National Transportation Safety Board. They complain that the burden of proof is on the airman to prove his or her innocence rather than the FAA proving guilt. To address this, the Pilot's Bill of Rights directs that, to the extent the NTSB finds practical, FAA enforcement proceedings should be conducted in accordance with the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and Federal Rules of Evidence. This is consistent with protections provided to defendants in other parts of our legal system. The Pilot's Bill of Rights also requires the FAA to better inform and advise an airman who is the subject of an investigation of his or her rights. The goal is to provide an airman with better and timely access to information. This includes notifying an airman that the releasable portions of the administrator's investigative report will, at the appropriate time, be available to the airman. The bill also clarifies that air traffic data collected by a government contractor that is available to the FAA, such as air traffic communication tapes, radar information, and air traffic controller statements, will also be available to the airman. However, it is important that the pilot community understands that when the data is to be obtained from a government contractor, time is of the essence. Tapes containing air traffic data from contractors is ordinarily recycled after 15 days and would no longer be available to the FAA or the airman. S. 1335 eliminates language that expressly bound the NTSB to all validly adopted interpretations of laws and regulations of the FAA unless the NTSB finds an interpretation to be arbitrary, capricious, or otherwise not according to law. The amendments are made only because they are redundant of what is already provided under law. The NTSB, when reviewing FAA cases, will continue to apply principles of judicial deference to the FAA interpretations of the laws, regulations, and policies in accordance with the Supreme Court precedent. The Pilot's Bill of Rights adds an additional way to appeal to the NTSB's decisions regarding FAA enforcement action. Currently, an airman goes before an administrative law judge at the NTSB and can appeal any decisions to the full NTSB board and ultimately to the Court of Appeals. According to pilots, the courts generally defer to the NTSB's decisions. It's not a true or fair appellate process. The Pilot's Bill of Rights allows an airman to elect to file an appeal of his or her case in either the U.S. District Court or the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. It is the intent of Congress that courts not act in a way that is contrary to civil aviation safety in conduction their reviews of the NTSB's decisions. Lastly, the Pilot's Bill of Rights requires the FAA to improve the system of providing notices to airmen or NOTAMs and to undertake an assessment of the medical certification standards and forms. The overwhelming volume of NOTAMs and the vague and outdated medical certification process can lead to confusion and ultimately an FAA enforcement proceeding against an airman. Again, I rise in strong support of S. 1335 and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of S. 1335, the Pilot's Bill of Rights. I want to commend Senator Inhofe from Oklahoma for his leadership on this issue. as well as Chairman Petri and Congressman Bouchon for bringing the bill to the floor in an expedited manner. S. 1335 revises the process for the Federal Aviation Administration enforcement action against pilots, mechanics, and other airmen. The bill also directs the FAA to streamline important safety-related information provided to pilots before flight. As I have said many times, the FAA must have the authority and resources necessary to keep the skies safe. To keep the skies safe, the FAA must use its enforcement power to take action, when appropriate, against pilots and other airmen who act in an unsafe manner. This bill does not weaken that authority. Rather, it requires the FAA to hand over, at the earliest appropriate time, the evidence that could be used against pilots involved in enforcement actions, and it provides pilots with a new opportunity to test the FAA's enforcement orders in court. Additionally, the bill directs the FAA to streamline its publication of notices to pilots to ensure that they receive high priority and relevant safety information before flight. This legislation is strongly supported by the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association and the general aviation community. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to support this bill authored by my friend Senator Inhofe, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Indiana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, again, I rise in strong support of S. 1335. I'd like to thank Mr. Graves, the gentleman from Missouri, the lead sponsor on the majority side, and Mr. Lipinski from Illinois from the minority side for bringing this bill to the House floor, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Indiana is recognized.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate Bill 1335? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.